Hi, this video is about how to get your website penalized by Google. In this video, I'm going to show you the best ways to get onto Google's naughty list so that you can understand how to avoid it. I'm very familiar with Google's Panda and Penguin and Pigeon and Possum, etc. penalty algorithms, or just algorithms in general. I've studied this heavily, and so I know some of the most common ways that people get hit by these things. And by understanding that, you can understand how to avoid it, because sometimes it's not obvious that that this is actually affecting you. I'm going to talk about that more in a second. Hi, my name is David Hood, and I've been doing SEO for over 10 years, full-time for over 7 years, and I'm on a mission to help at least 10,000 other people make their first $1 million online. So let's talk about actually the different kinds of cases, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around this. Most people, when they think of a penalty, they typically think, or at least they used to think, of a manual action, because Google's a primary way of dealing with manipulative websites, as they would probably put it, would be through a manual action. There'd be some sort of indication that something was going on, and then they have somebody look at it and look at the details, and they go, oh, okay, this is how we're going to change it. They've moved way more towards algorithmic actions, because their algorithms have gotten way better just in the last like 5 years. And like Panda and Penguin were like some of the major updates that allowed them to do this. Part of what those algorithm updates did was, I believe Panda, it was named after someone named Panda, who made it so that they were able to look at like an order of magnitude more thing, like 10 times more things at the same with the same amount of computing power. And as a result, they were actually able to check things to a sufficient level to make some judgments in an algorithmic fashion. So I think they're really happy overall with the algorithmic actions, and there's some positives and negatives to this. Overall, I think it's good because with an algorithmic action, it's much easier to recover from it. In terms of like a manual action, that requires sort of like a manual review process. It's much more difficult. But it's been a long time since I've even seen a manual action. I know it still does happen, but it's much less common. They'd rather if it were completely up to Google, they would do no manual actions. They would just, their algorithm would take care of it completely, and they'd have just all engineers. But I think they acknowledge that, there's a certain amount of manual human action that helps tune kind of their algorithmic action as well. So I don't know if they'll ever completely get rid of it. Also, I want to talk about kind of like penalties versus filters, which are kind of different, but I'd say actually filters are a subset of penalties. And a lot of times when someone says penalty, what's actually happening is a filter. And so a filter would be sort of like, for a specific search phrase, you're filtered out of the search results. Okay, but your site is still, and I'll talk about de-index versus filter, because it's kind of a very similar thing. De-index is where you're completely penalized. You're removed from their index. Even if someone is searching for your brand in Google, you won't show up. Even if you do what's it called, site:/domain-name.com, your site's still not going to show up. If this shows 0 results, then you're de-indexed, and either your site is really new, or it's been down for a really long time, or you've been penalized. All right, and it's pretty rare now. This you can be de-indexed algorithmically, but a lot of the times, what it'll end up doing with a filter, let's see if this equals 0 results. I would say results. I can't spell right now. Result. Oh my god. This yields what I would call a penalty. And a filter would be where, like, you don't show up. It depends on top 3 to 5 pages. I've seen one where it was actually like the top result was everything went to page 7 and beyond. I've also seen where you just couldn't make it beyond page 3 or 4. That's a really a common thing with a filter. And then this is still, technically this is some sort of penalty. but in a way, it is possible. A lot of times you can be filtered for one set of search phrases, but not for another. It really depends on a lot of factors, and this is what Penguin brought about. So Panda was the first thing that came about, and that one was pretty substantial. But really, it was when they had Penguin, and then when Penguin and Panda had just come out, or when Penguin had just come out, Panda had been out for a little bit. Some huge upgrades into their ability to find kind of like spam and really figure out whether or not something was natural. There's some crazy stuff that you used to be able to get away with only like 5 years ago. That's kind of hard to believe. Okay, so what are some things that you can actually do that will trigger some of these effects? So you do follow backlinks with over-optimized anchors. So what's anchor? An anchor text is the text that you would click on. Let's say I'm on somebody's website and you do, for more info, click here. And this is like, bolded and underlined where you run the mouse over it and it actually clicks through to the link. Okay, so in this case, click here would be the link, would be the anchor text. It used to be you could do, let's say you wanted to rank for Dallas Plumber, you'd do Dallas Plumber, click here. For more info, click here. If you had Dallas Plumber in your anchor text 100 times, the chances of you ranking really well for Dallas Plumber was actually really high. And now Google recognizes that this is very unnatural. You still want like a certain amount of like Dallas Plumber, but you really have to mix it up and be a whole lot more careful with this. I also want to point out that I did do follow, which is technically not a thing. It's either no follow or not no follow. If you have anchor text doesn't affect you if it's a no follow link. I've seen other people actually try to do negative SEO on a website where they did a bunch of no follow links and it didn't do anything because they don't count the anchor text. Now, no follow links can still help or hurt you because I think the relevancy of those no follow links still matters. So you still want to get no follow links, and I think it's also natural to have a certain amount of no follow links. So if all of your links were do follow, at some point that's going to be a signal of your link profile being unnatural. So, this used to work really, really well, and that's part of the reason why it doesn't work well now. Penguin sniffs this out like very, very quickly. And so now if you're worried about your link profile, what I would do is I would search up your top 3 to 5 competitors, put them into Ahrefs, and look at their anchor text, and then do the same thing to your own website and see, where you are lacking. Do you have too many what I would call kind of exact match anchors, or do you have not enough? And that is what I would do. Now it's not that simple, but that's one quick way to go about that. Okay, so keyword stuff in top on page places, we would say this is like domain name, domain, URL, title, H1 through 3. So if you're trying to rank for Dallas Plumber and you have DallasPlumber.com / Dallas Texas Plumbers, and then in your title it was Dallas Plumber, and then your H1 through H3 you had Dallas Plumber, and all of those, the chances that you're going to get some sort of over optimization, probably filter, is likely. Now it depends on what your off page is. If you have very little off page, you can actually be a lot more aggressive with this on page stuff. At the same time, you can't control your off page completely. Someone else could link to you kind of naturally. And so there's a balance here to where if you were to do that and someone else were to actually naturally link to you, you could actually be hurt by this. So this is kind of a balancing act between the on page and the off page. But you definitely want to avoid this. So for example, in the URL, a lot of times they'll have like Joe's Dallas Plumber.com, and then you'll have Dallas Plumber, and then plumber in, I'm exaggerating here. So right now we've got Dallas Plumber, and Dallas over and over and over again, and you really, really want to avoid, I typically try and only use like a word once, maybe twice in the full URL. This is definitely heavily over-optimized. And same thing with the title. I think you could be a little bit more aggressive in the title, and if it's really important, or if it's like a really short search phrase, or it gets searched a lot, then you can actually put it in the title a bit more. But I would not go over twice, especially for a specific phrase. Mix up the phrase and make it slightly different with the second one. But even then, I've seen people, use like Dallas Plumber, for example, like 4 or 5 times in the title, and that's just too much. That's not going to work very well for you. Okay, so copy a competitor's content heavily and use it on your own website. Now, there's a lot of misunderstanding around how duplicate content works, and Panda primarily deals with duplicate content, and really it's not so much that you're penalized as you're filtered. So if Google sees 2 pieces of content that are the same competing for the same search result, they will only put one on the first page, because they don't want to, imagine if 10 different websites have the same piece of content, they don't want to show that same piece of content on all the 10 search results. It's not a good experience for their searchers. So a lot, and this is actually a way that some people used to, I think it's harder to do now, but someone would take your content and put it on their own site or another site that has a lot of authority, and they would kind of take your spot in the search results because that one has more authority. But I think it's a lot harder to do that now. And so, if you copy and use, especially if you don't link to it, if you link to it, actually that's a signal that, oh, okay, well, you're referring people there, and maybe you're adding your own piece and you're kind of syndicating other people's content, which is completely natural on the internet. But at the same time, you don't want to do too much of this. All right. Have a super slow website. This is also Panda. If your website, the difference between a website that loads in a second and 2 seconds, typically it's not going to be a whole lot. I would say that by and large, it's not going to play any significant factor in your ranking. But the difference between 2 seconds and 15 seconds is huge. And what you'll see, especially with any sort of Panda penalty, is that you'll see your rankings slowly drop over time. And after about 2, 3, 4 months of having a super slow site, a lot of your rankings will have gone away. The good news is that when you fix it, you'll see kind of the reverse happening, and you'll slowly increase. And so, having a super slow website, you'll be filtered. Get a lot of low quality and / irrelevant links. So just because a link is from an authoritative site, from a popular site, doesn't mean it's actually going to help you. Okay. Also, low quality would be links like from Russia, or links that just don't have a lot of links going to them, so they don't have a lot of popularity. That's going to hurt you as well. And I would also say anything illegal, like there's places that sell links that are on hacked sites, so the site was hacked for the purposes of putting links, kind of discrete links on there. And if you buy those kinds of links, you have and they get found out, you have a very good chance of actually having a very hard penalty get onto your site. And there are other ways to get your site penalized, but it typically nowadays it's more algorithmically done. So if you have run into this, then don't, I wouldn't fret too much, because there are ways to get back from these. At this point, I would say that there's no penalty that I would feel like you could never come back from. The manual penalty is probably the hardest, because it kind of depends on like who you get as your contact in there, and it can take a lot longer than an algorithmic penalty. So a lot of times you can fix very quickly, even if it's a very substantial one. So let me know what you think of this video. Please leave a comment and subscribe if you liked it, and like the video if you liked it. Or if you didn't like it, feel free to thumbs down it. And I'm fine with that. If you genuinely didn't like it, or you thought I said something wrong, please let me know. I mean, I'm not perfect and I don't catch everything. I don't think anyone knows everything about SEO. Yeah, and thanks for watching, and have a great day. Bye.